It's been described as a shameful milestone. The children's charity UNICEF says 10,000 children have now been killed or maimed in the war in Yemen. Another 400,000 are suffering from severe malnutrition. 4 out of 5 children need humanitarian aid, while millions of children and adults alike don't have access to safe water. Well, since 2015, Saudi Arabia and its allies have been fighting Iranian-backed Houthi rebels with a devastating outcome for civilians there. Well, joining us for more is the UNICEF spokesperson, James Elder. He joins us from Geneva, Switzerland. Thank you for being with us tonight. And this is really a truly horrifying statistic, isn't it? 4 children are dying every single day in Yemen.
Yeah, it's awful, and it's been going on, as you say, there for 6 years. I mean, the thing with a number like this is these are all verified cases. These are cases the United Nations verifies. Unfortunately, we know the real number of children who were killed or horribly injured by munitions or landmines is significantly more than this. It's just not recorded, except, of course, by those children's families. I mean, I've just come back from Yemen 2 days ago. I saw the impact of this. We know what conflict looks like on our television. We see the cities destroyed and the bridges blown up. What the damage really done in conflict is to children. It's children who lose a leg to a landmine. It's children who are severely malnourished and in an incubator on death's door. These are the real victims of this conflict.
And there's a lack of access to clean water, there's severe malnutrition. Why isn't the international aid getting through to these people who so desperately need it?
Look, there's a couple of things. On one hand, there are definitely pockets right now around MAIMED and so on where fighting has intensified, and that means it's very difficult for UN agencies to get there, which means it's even more difficult for those people who are enduring that, who are literally in the firing line. What we're also seeing is, unfortunately, that we have a proper funding crisis. On the back of, I guess, the whole world has been dealing with COVID. There's been emergencies, from Haiti to Syria. And that means that there's a lack of funding. And we know in this world that there's not really. It just means there's a lack of funding going towards those agencies in Yemen. Unfortunately, we can draw a clear line between donor support, or at least everyday support to an organisation like UNICEF, and lives saved or lives lost. It's that simple. Whether it's getting, plumping that nutritional food to a child, or rebuilding a water point, or doing some education for children on landmines. These things take money and these things save lives. But as you rightly say, right now we have a funding crisis on top of a humanitarian crisis, amid a conflict, amid COVID.
Now, recently the UN Human Rights Council voted to end a probe into allegations of war crimes committed by both sides in the conflict in Yemen. Has that had an impact, do you think?
At the moment, probably no. As the United Nations said on that we will continue to do the work we can on the ground. I think it was expressed that was considered to be regrettable. In the short term, of course, that decision was only made a few weeks ago. UNICEF and others will keep doing our monitoring and reporting. Most importantly, though, beyond bearing witness to this, is, as we have been saying, and it's coming from the Secretary General over years and years, the guns need to fall silent. We need the warring parties and those who hold influence over them to come to the peace table. That's a fundamental. Whilst we wait for that, and we still wait for that, then agencies like UNICEF need that fiscal support so we keep children alive, and then we aim to give them a better tomorrow.
When you talk about the funding crisis, do you think there is, partly related to COVID, but also is there a certain amount of war fatigue, war weariness, because the conflict in Yemen has been going on so long, as has the conflict in Syria? Do you think people are just feeling that they can't really help?
I think almost certainly yes. Without crystal balling, an organisation like UNICEF is covered by donors, big donors, the Europeans, Japanese, Americans, British, but also a lot of money comes from mums and dads. I'm sure that's the case, but having just been in Yemen, let me promise you that I saw no one more fatigued than mothers and children. They say you don't define a life by success, but you define it by how many times a person is knocked down but continues to get up. I saw time and again mothers and children getting up in Yemen to almost impossible odds. Paediatricians, nurses, doctors going to work day after day. Some of them haven't been paid for years. So, of course, we understand that fatigue. We understand the generosity of people. But the most exhausted, the people who are really suffering, are those people on the ground in Yemen where that conflict still rages. They're the ones who really need that smallest bit of fiscal support.
And when we talk specifically about the conflict in Yemen, are children being disproportionately affected compared to other conflicts around the world?
It's a good question. Everywhere we go, children are disproportionately affected in that conflict because, of course, they're the most vulnerable. So, on one hand, when it comes to that type of malnutrition you mentioned, severe acute malnutrition, the type that kills a child, that comes because, that baby is still 18 months old, so still is very susceptible to a waterborne disease, whereas an adult may not be. So that kills thousands of children. I think it's something like a child that dies every 10 minutes in Yemen from preventable ills. So there's no doubt that being killed by that secondary impact of a conflict makes them the most vulnerable. Then, of course, being caught in the firing line, the 10,000 number, that shameful milestone. I met some of those children. I met, for example, a 13-year-old little boy, Ibrahim, gone to school for the day, helping his family, raising cattle, walks on a landmine. When I saw him, he was at a UNICEF prosthetic rehabilitation site and, getting new legs fitted. So those cases are multiplied time and again, all those horrors that never, ever should have to befall a child.